presentation, we'll go through some tips for the community on how to recognise and respond to suicide risk. Suicide rates have reached a 10-year high in Australia, and it is now the leading cause of death for those aged between 15 and 44. We are losing about 8 people to suicide every day. It's important to remember that not all suicides are predictable, and that another person's thoughts and actions are not your fault and not within your control. All we can do is learn about the risk factors, how to respond to them, and get the person to a professional, which is what this video is all about. If the information does cause any distress, please call Lifeline on 13 11 14. Research has found there are 9 main ways to prevent suicide. Some of these include training GPs to recognise signs of suicide and referring them to mental health support, restricting access to anything lethal, responsible media reporting, and community awareness campaigns. Research has also found that 70 to 90% of people who die by suicide communicated some of their intent to family and friends, while only 20 to 30% reached a professional. This shows just how important it is for the community to know how to recognise and respond to suicide risk. Here's how. The first step to the community becoming part of suicide prevention is learning how to recognise those at risk. Research has been able to narrow down the key risk factors to suicide, which includes extreme feelings of guilt, shame, worthlessness or hopelessness, any previous suicide attempts, mental health difficulties, whether current or a history of, stressful life events or loss, whether that be a relationship, employment, money, a history of abuse or trauma, someone with chronic health problems or pain, someone who might be single, unemployed, isolated, those with a minority, sexual or gender orientation, Caucasian males, and those with impulsive traits. Next, we need to learn the key warning signs to suicide risk, such as drawing, writing, or talking about death or suicide, even jokingly, such as saying, "I wish I could go to sleep and never wake up," or hopeless statements like, "I just can't do this anymore." If someone is researching and preparing for something dangerous, saying goodbye or giving away possessions, getting things in order like writing a will, maybe losing interest in things they used to enjoy, taking less care of their appearance, writing goodbye notes, self-destructive behaviour such as increased drug or alcohol use, withdrawing from others, difficulty sleeping or oversleeping, and dramatic changes in mood. The second step to the community becoming part of suicide prevention is interpreting any risk or warning sign as urgent. This is because suicide is hard to predict, and no one can really know if someone will act on any suicidal thoughts. It's therefore better to ask and be wrong than not ask at all. Some people think that people who engage in self-harm behaviour or talk about suicide are just seeking attention. But we know from research that these behaviours does increase the likelihood of someone eventually dying by suicide. So it is important to act immediately. The third step is to take personal responsibility to do something. You may have heard of the bystander effect. This is a well-known phenomenon where if someone needs help, most people actually do nothing. And this is because they hope someone else will help, they don't know how to help, they don't understand the situation, or they fear making a mistake or getting embarrassed. It's important to recognise this part of human nature and make sure you do something. You may not agree with something this person has done, especially if their risk factor is a recent embarrassment or shame due to inappropriate behaviour they may have engaged in. Suicide does not have to be the answer though. Suicidal thoughts and shame are time limited and it does pass, and if you can help this person survive the acute risk, you'll have gone a long way to a good outcome. And they can even use what they've been through to help someone else with the same difficulty. And if you find it too hard to go through these steps, find someone else who can. Suicidal thoughts and risk factors should not be kept a secret. The fourth step is knowing what to do. And in this situation, firstly it means telling the person what you've noticed. For example, you can say, I notice you just said you just can't do this anymore. Or, I've noticed you've been through a lot lately, with losing your job and all your family issues you've got going on. Then, it's important to ask directly about suicide. You can say something like, when people go through really hard times, they can have thoughts about ending their life. Has this come up for you at all? If they say no, you can follow the steps on the next page. If they say yes, it's important to ask more. Ask, have they thought about when or how they might end their life? And do they think they're likely to act on these thoughts? If they are, this puts them at much higher risk, and it's important to get them to a professional. You can say something like, I notice you're really overwhelmed right now. There's been so much going on for you. And when there's so much pressure, it can be helpful to go to hospital for an assessment. Here, there might be a team of doctors, counsellors, social workers, who together can come up with a plan to support you. They might be able to solve practical issues, like setting up payments from the government to help support you, helping you find a new job, and mental health support to target the distress you've been under. How about we go up to the hospital now and see what we can do? Then, it's important to take them to hospital and get them assessed. If they refuse to go, you can call an ambulance on 000. While this is very difficult and distressing to do, it may save their life. Part of step 4 in knowing what to do is how to support those who have shown a lot of those warning signs and risk factors, but at the moment aren't actively suicidal. It's still important to support them and keep them safe. Here's how. Remove anything dangerous they could use to harm themselves, including drugs or alcohol. Ensure they have crisis lines such as Lifeline or 1300 MH call where they can call for a mental health assessment. Encourage them to call these or call the line for them. Encourage them to see a GP and psychologist and even offer to take them. All Australian residents have access to 10 rebated psychology sessions every calendar year. Ask who their main supports are and make sure they are aware and understand the level of pressure this person has been under and are part of supporting them. Engage them in meaningful activities such as employment, volunteering. Build a safety plan with them. This means asking them what situations or thoughts trigger having thoughts about suicide and thinking of ways they can cope to get through times like this, either on their own or who they can call. Beyond Blue has an app that can help with safety planning, which is called Beyond Now. Download it and check it out. Engage them in social and physical activity. Ensure they're getting enough sleep and eating a healthy diet. And finally, continue to monitor their suicide risk. You can always ask again, later. How are they going? Are they having thoughts about suicide? The fifth and final step to the community becoming part of suicide prevention is reaching an active and conscious decision to help. Most people shy away from talking about suicide and fear that they'll put the idea in someone else's head. Experts agree and have found that this is not the case, and that people who are asked about suicide actually feel relieved and validated that someone has finally recognised their distress and is willing to help. Remember, suicidal thoughts are time limited and often underlined by stress that can be resolved through practical and psychological support, so getting the person to a professional is key. Don't be a bystander to suicide. Instead, learn and recognise risk and warning signs, interpret them as urgent, take personal responsibility to do something, learn how to help practice those questions that we've gone through, and reach that conscious decision to help. Finally, it's important to remember to take care of yourself. Be aware of your own coping. If you notice your usual mood, appetite, concentration, temper, thoughts, behaviour, or sleep getting worse, these are red flags for reduced resilience. So get back to basics. Make sure you're eating healthy, getting enough sleep, exercising, socialising, and taking time out to relax. This will help manage stress. And importantly, if you have or have not had the conversation about suicide with someone, and later they make an attempt on their life or end their life, seek support for yourself immediately. Remember, someone else's thoughts, actions, and past are not your fault. not within your control and not your responsibility. See the next page for more support options for yourself and others. Thank you for watching.